My boyfriend of almost 3 years told me a series of white lies that to me seem more serious. Can't tell if I'm overreacting or if this is actually indicative of a bigger problem. My boyfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years, living together for 2. We have a pretty good relationship, obviously with ups and downs, but we make it work and are happy. A little background on me and my boyfriend. I come from a single-parent home. My father was absent. My mother was and is by no means perfect, but she did her best with what she had. We were poor. Life was never easy for us, but we had each other. Since I was pretty young, I've wanted to pay her back someday. I've worked incredibly hard to be able to do so. I help her financially as much as I can and regularly pay her bills //send her cash. I'm also her only living child now, as my brother passed away 5 years ago, which basically left me to help her. I don't care, I love my mother, and the right thing to do is to help her when she needs it. But is stressful. This is relevant because my boyfriend described coming from a somewhat similar past, and it is something we have bonded over. Having the mutual experiences seemed to bring us closer. He told me he also helped his parents financially, and we would often vent to each other about the stress it brings. I am not one to confide in many people, so having someone who I felt like actually understood me was meaningful to me. So here is where the lies come in, and I need someone to either tell me I'm not crazy and this is horror, or that I am crazy and this isn't a huge deal. I'm fine with either. When we met, my boyfriend lived in a condo in a pretty swanky part of the city. I live in the US Northeast. He told me he owned that apartment / condo. I found this to be interesting / odd because he was 28 at the time, and I know this property is upwards of $650,000 on the low end, and he was in an entry-level job for only like 2 years, so the numbers just didn't really add up. Whatever, maybe he's good at saving. But then, since living together, I never once saw a piece of mail for a mortgage payment, electric bill, taxes, nothing. Not for 2 whole years. Very odd. Also, when we started living together, he didn't have his room rented out in the former apartment yet, so he was still responsible for that portion of the rent. He would send a Venmo payment to his mother on the 1st of every month for his portion. I don't own property, but I can't think of a scenario where I would Venmo my mother to pay the mortgage on a property I supposedly own. Getting more odd. He would then go to his parents' house for an afternoon and come back really upset. Usually when I would ask why, it was because they were having financial problems and he needed to help them out. I totally understood this and supported him. He literally has cried on my shoulder about this many times. He tried to start a company years back and ended up getting into debt somehow. He told me this debt was $17,000 and that he paid it off. I'm confused because I met him only 2 to 3 years after the supposed debt accrued / company dissolved, and it was already paid off. He told me when he moved back home after the business failed, he was $17,000 in debt and living at his parents' house working at a minimum wage job. How someone with a minimum wage job pays off that much debt in 3 years, I'll never know. We got into a fight a few weeks ago and I finally had enough and confronted him about these things. He doesn't help his parents, they actually pay his phone bill, and this was all a lie. He doesn't own that apartment, he didn't pay off that debt from his company. He initially told me his parents helped pay it off and then like 3 minutes later, came clean. And said that his business partner paid it off, so I have literally no idea what the truth is there, and if anything, in my eyes. His parents are the ones who are financially supporting him. So now, I'm dating a 31 years old man who doesn't pay his own phone bill, was lying to me and / or completely fabricating aspects of his life for 3 years. And then when confronted about it, continued to make up lies and then came clean about them 5 minutes later. I'm obviously concerned that he could lie for this long, about fundamentally important things like our values, and so on. I sincerely thought I would marry this man. He seemed to understand me like no one else and to be a truly caring and genuine person. Now I'm having a hard time rationalizing actually planning a life around someone who would not only lie about their background and family etc., but also financial aspects. Aside from that, I now can't tell what is the truth and what is a lie. I've also noticed other things he has lied about, called him out on it, and he has denied it outright to my face. I see this as a form of gaslighting, as I know I'm not wrong, but he is trying to convince me otherwise. Am I overreacting? Is this a white lie that went haywire? Or is this actually a series of complete and utter bullshit used to manipulate me? And also, is it insane for me to actually consider a life with this man? My husband Derek and I have been married for 3 years, together for 7 total. Several years ago, about 6 now, I guess, I worked closely with a male coworker, Paul, that Derek was never fond of. Paul and I never had an inappropriate relationship. Derek's jealousy wasn't completely out of nowhere. I get why he felt that way. Those couple years were a perfect storm of relationship stress. I was working long hours. We were living apart after trying and failing to move in together. Our relationship was still fairly new. And then you add in a handsome coworker I had to spend long hours with and saw more than my boyfriend at the time. Paul was the source of several fights. Again, we never did anything that wasn't completely kosher. Eventually I told Derek he needed to trust me and get over it, or we were going to have to break up. He said he would stop worrying, and for the most part things were good. When Paul transferred out of state a few months later, things were really good. There were no worries at all, and our relationship has been amazingly strong ever since. This last weekend, my husband went out with a couple friends to some bars and a football game. When he came home, he was pretty wasted. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned how a friend of his had told him that he broke up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him. I commented on how that was a bummer and good for him for finding out before they got too serious. Derek, however, had a different take on it. He said it was a shame because they had seemed like a good couple, and if they really loved each other his friend could move past the cheating. Just like he had with me. At first I thought my husband was admitting to cheating on me, and asked him what he meant. He told me he always knew that Paul and I had slept together at least once all those years ago. But he knew I was the one for him and forgave me. I told Derek that I had never so much as even hugged Paul, except maybe at his going away party, let alone slept with him. Derek sort of just patted me on the arm, said of course, and passed out. The next morning I asked him about the conversation and he said it was okay, he had forgiven me, it wasn't even an issue. I again stressed that I had never cheated on him with anybody and I needed him to believe me. He sort of did the same, of course you didn't, babe wink thing again, and went to work. Every time I've tried to talk to him since, he won't hear me out. I'm this close to losing it with him. I need him to know that I never cheated, and I'm hurt that he thinks I would do something like that. What do I do? Do I just let him have this since it's not really hurting anything, or what? I don't want my own husband to think so little of me that he thinks I would cheat. That's not who I am. I am a 35 years old female, a musician, playing gigs and at an orchestra as a violinist. Rehearsals just resumed, so orchestra is my main source of income ATM. My sister, she's 26, is a social worker, working 3 days a week, so minimal income, but she adores her job. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment, both rooms around 9-10 square meters. Using the second room as a practice room / storage for my instruments, 3 violins, 2 guitars, a digital piano, a small drum kit, and other stuff. 4 months ago my sister broke up with her BF and I offered her my spare room, temporarily. I moved most of my stuff to the living room so I could fit a small bed in there. Sis moved in, but she asked me to move more stuff to the living room. I moved pretty much everything sans the piano, to the point where the living room became uninhabitable. Then she started complaining about my violin playing, saying it gave her headaches. I told her I couldn't stop the daily practice without risking my only steady income. The arguments got worse. She told me to play only when she wasn't home, but with her work schedule I couldn't afford that. I tried switching to the electric violin, but even that can be pretty loud, so it didn't help. Several times I reminded her this was only a temporary arrangement, but she didn't seem to hear me. 2 weeks ago I arrived home to finding my piano in the bathroom, near water and humidity, because my sis needed the space for her new double bed. When I told her she can't SRSLY expect me to store my piano there, she said, "Yeah, you will just have to sell it, I guess." I got so mad I told her she has 7 days to leave, but she didn't take me seriously. For a week I only talked to her to remind her how much time she has left, but she always laughed it off, told me to stop acting like a crazy person. When the deadline came I boxed up all her stuff while she was at work, booked an Airbnb bedsit close by and drove her stuff there. She was livid but couldn't do anything but take her new keys and stay there. The following week she kept calling me with an increasingly apologetic tone, saying she shouldn't have moved my piano or bought a bed. She promised she would put more effort into finding a new place. And by the end of the week I considered most of our issues at least addressed, so I drove to help her move back. But when I was carrying the first box down, she went, "I do hope you will at least stop with the violin this time." I absolutely refused to take more of that *****ing violin. I dropped the box, wished her good luck and left. Now, 2 days later. On one hand it feels like a huge overreaction to leave my own sister literally homeless because of an argument about the violin. I know she cannot afford to stay there, but on the other hand I have no plans to allow her back here, because I feel she would just continue crossing boundaries and never leave. My husband, 35 years old, does not have a car. He sold his old one to help pay for his brother's wedding. I did not agree on this, but he had this car before we got together, so it's a shared property. Besides that, I have my own car, so that did not affect me till my husband started complaining about having to commute to work and hangout places. He tried to get me to let him drive my car several times, but I stood firm and put a boundary, making him understand that my car will never be driven by him. One of the reasons why is because of how bad his driving is. His brother lives out of town. My husband asked if he could drive my car to the wedding, but I refused, but not because I'm not invited. Another story for another day, because like I said, my car is off limits. He threw a fit calling me unreasonable to let him take public transportation because he can barely stand it for 10 minutes, let alone hours. I said it wasn't my problem, which irritated him but made him stop arguing about it. The day that he was supposed to travel out of town, I woke at 10 a.m. and couldn't find my car key. I went outside and couldn't find my car either. I was beyond pissed. I called him and like I expected, he took it and was on his way to the other town. I lost it and told him I gave him no permission to take it for a whole 5 days and said that if he won't turn around with it and come home, then I'd call the cops and report it missing. His response was, "You wouldn't dare do it 'cause you know what would happen." I hung up on him, then immediately called the police and told them about my situation. I did not tell them my husband took it because they'd think it's a family dispute and decide to not get involved. I just reported it missing. 2 hours later I got a call from my husband saying he was back in town and was being held at our local police station. I went to the station and talked to the cops. My husband made a scene there, swearing over and over that I gave him permission to take it and said I was acting out of jealousy and spite because he was going to attend a wedding that I was not invited to. I took my car and went home, but he had to stay a little longer. He came home in the evening and went on a rage fit about how I created an awful situation and almost caused him to miss his brother's wedding. He called me vindictive, bitter, and a lunatic to call the police on him and try to accuse him of stealing my car. He had to leave the same day to be able to be there with his family and decided to extend his stay, and he still hasn't gotten back yet. Right now his mom and brother are blasting me for what happened and calling me spiteful.